Hello, and thanks for joining us today. Welcome to TEKsystems webinar, Redefining Digital Business During Defining Times. I'm Laura Prezi, TEKsystems Senior Manager of Events and Customer Engagement, and your host for today. This webinar was developed to provide insight for technology decision makers into how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted digital transformation efforts and provide recommendations to help navigate the digital journey as your organization shifts to focus forward. A few housekeeping items before we dive in. All lines have been muted upon entry. Should you have a question regarding technical issues, please use the chat feature and send a message to the host. The Q&A option is disabled for this session. If you would like to ask a question at any time during this presentation, use the chat feature to contact the host or panelist. At the end of this webinar, please take a few minutes and complete the survey that will pop up at the end of this session. This webinar will be recorded and made available shortly after the event has ended. I'd like to take a moment to introduce TEKsystems. We're partners in transformation. As an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application, we work with over 6,000 clients, including 80% of the Fortune 500, to drive change. Our speakers for today are Ricardo Madan, Vice President of Technology, Products, and Services, Corey Wasney, Director of Strategy and Integration, Jason Heyman, Manager of Research and Market Intelligence. I will now turn it over to Jason, who will start today's webinar.
Thanks, Laura. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Now, before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to provide some background and context to the research data we'll be discussing today. Back in April, we published our annual State of Digital Transformation report that explores how organizations are leveraging technology to optimize and modernize their business. Technology and business decision makers were surveyed in December 2019, prior to the pandemic forcing widespread shutdowns. Now, while the report still provides valuable insight, the pandemic has pushed organizations to rethink and, in some cases, reinvent their original technology roadmaps for 2020 and beyond. So in June, we again surveyed technology and business decision makers to gain insights into how the pandemic impacted digital transformation efforts. So today we're going to share those insights and perspectives and hopefully help your business shift focus forward. So let's take a look at some of the highlights from the research. We found in the survey back in June, 8 out of 10 companies expect 50% or more of their workforce to work remote for the rest of 2020. About 60% of organizations have delayed digital transformation projects as a direct result of the pandemic. But despite those delays, the customer continues to be the top focus for digital transformation efforts in 2020. Let's go ahead and move ahead to the next slide, Laura. So what's driving organizations to transform? In our 2020 State of Digital Transformation research, we looked at the nature of an organization's digital transformation efforts. What are they aspiring to? And there was a very clear divide, with about half of organizations looking more internally. They were looking to optimize processes or seek ways to gain efficiencies. The other half, about 47%, were more disruption driven. They're seeking to use technology to create new revenue streams and business models, more of a customer-centric approach. Rick, what are you seeing with customers in terms of their aspirations?
Well, we see the same divide and aspirations that you described, Jason. With respect to the orgs that are looking internally to optimize processes, gain efficiencies, even prior to COVID, we were helping a major airline customer of ours modernize a formerly monolithic, big, ugly baggage application, which had become very expensive to maintain over time and was not driving their own CX or customer experience to the degree that they wanted. So work began breaking this monster down into microservices, migrating this environment to AWS, AWS being one of our rockstar partners here at TEKsystems, by the way, a little plug. But alas, COVID hit and life as we know it changed. And the airline industry, as we know it, was immediately slammed, perhaps the hardest when we compare it against service industry and hospitality and so many others. But to our customers' incredible credit, they knew that this new baggage handling environment that we were in flight in developing for them, would still realize massive cost savings, massive saves on overhead, and that it would enable massive boosts to their CX through whatever horizon of COVID difficulty we were going to face. So they allowed us to continue this important work. So, that's kind of an example of, what started off as an internally focused, efficiency optimization focused use case. To the other side of what you described is for the disruption drivers, that side of the divide. We've got an awesome global wealth management customer that comes to mind. And similar to the airline, we were helping this organization modernize various apps, various different environments to the cloud, also pre-COVID. And since COVID, now that many FinServe companies are retrenching in their investments and retrenching in project plans and retrenching in transformation efforts, this customer is going the other way. This customer is mobilizing us to further help figure out how to offer new and better products and better CX. That's going to be a theme, I think, today, right, Jason? But better CX to their consumers by taking advantage of any number of native cloud services. Now that their consumers are spending a lot more time at home and generally have a little more bandwidth to allocate capital, to manage nest eggs, brokerage accounts, and the like. So we're increasingly moving more data, more workloads to the cloud, developing more cloud native functionality to help this global wealth manager disrupt their market, disrupt their marketplace really through innovation, new products, new offerings. It's a really cool place to be. So, to put a point on all that, motives for digital transformation might be a little different across that divide that you talked about, Jason, and certainly across these two representative examples. What seems to remain the same is this legitimate focus on the customer and keeping the customer right in the middle of these transformation efforts.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Rick. Yeah, and it's certainly interesting. You got two very different industry sectors impacted by the pandemic in very different ways. And to your point, the customer kind of remains at the center of everything. Laura, let's go ahead and go to the next slide here. That's a perfect kind of segue. So in our recent survey, we wanted to look at how the pandemic impacted digital transformation goals. So how did those kind of big rocks need to be adjusted for organizations when the pandemic hit? And some of the illustrations there that Rick just provided, organizations are still keeping their eye on the prize for the remainder of 2020. They're fully focused on engaging customers, creating the best customer experiences possible. And many of the other strategic goals that we surveyed on, they remain intact as well. But there were a couple of areas that stood out in terms of some shifts in the priority. And organizations seem to be making the biggest adjustments in the areas of trying to increase speed to market of products and services. So they're trying to get things out quicker and faster. They're looking to bolster cybersecurity, a lot more focus there in that area. And then finally, upgrades to legacy IT systems. While still a big rock, still a big goal, it seemed to be downgraded a little bit in terms of the priority when we most recently surveyed those decision makers. Corey, how do these goals resonate with what you're seeing in the market?
Yes, thanks, Jason. Certainly the focus and where we're seeing most of the activity is organizations trying to increase the speed to market and, for their services and products, along with bolstering cybersecurity. And what's interesting, in many cases, they're trying to do this hand in hand. When you think about how the pandemic has created an immediate and now seemingly more accepted and adopted remote workforce strategy, which not only increases the inherent risk, but you couple that with the overarching and increased attack surface that's out there, it's accelerating the need and elevating the standards towards bolstering that cybersecurity as they push those products and services forward. So, for example, Circadence, which is a great customer that we work with, they're a cybersecurity learning platform company. They asked us to work with them to build out a cybersecurity platform. It was aimed at developing a new next-gen cybersecurity simulation platform that was powered by artificial intelligence and designed for Microsoft to sell as part of their security portfolio of services. It's a pretty cool example, as it really encompasses a full stack solution with new features and capabilities that we're talking about, with an intentional increase to scale capacity and throughput in order to accelerate the speed to market, But then you compound that with the ability, to drive and bolster up that security that we're talking about, which in this particular case too, we were able to work with Microsoft and draw some of their strategic investment funds forward. And then really at the end of the day, it helped poise both of them to drive their digital strategies forward. Another example, especially when you consider the impact the pandemic has had on the travel and hospitality and entertainment industry, as Rick mentioned, is with a big, large customer of ours, Best Western, and working with them over many years, and really working into their digital transformational efforts. We coined the term with them, applications without limits, and which basically encompasses Best Western's 34 core business applications. They've taken a multi-dimensional approach in their transformational effort with a keen eye on maximizing value for their customers by rethinking the customer experience, enhancing the digital capabilities, all while reducing that cost of ownership that we talk about, and where in your slide here is showing that there's a pivot maybe away from not necessarily looking at those legacy IT systems, but in Best Western's case, they looked at it in a 360-degree view and are really capitalizing on all of those. So essentially, in that journey, they also are dealing with how they are strategically planning to take on their digital initiatives. That includes an agile transformation, introducing DevOps practices and standards, accelerating migration to the cloud, all the while looking to decrease that technical debt along the platform of applications that are there. So to put a real point on it and make it real, their total cost of ownership has been reduced by more than 20%, and they're in a really good position as they look to introduce and drive the new capabilities forward with their customer and member hotels, as the industry recovers.
Yeah, a lot of different kind of balls in the air as organizations sort of pivot and adjust and adapt to the pandemic. Let's go ahead and move up over to the next slide. Corey had mentioned remote work, Laura, and that's something that I'm sure a lot of people that are on this call today are experiencing in some way, shape, or form. But when lockdowns force businesses to close, most organizations lack the infrastructure for large portions of their workforce to work remotely, or maybe they just didn't have the incentive to do that, or thought it would be too much of a challenge. But today, most sectors have scaled to fully support a near total remote workforce. And in our survey, we found that 85% of the respondents said that 3/4 or more of their workforce can work remote today, which is pretty amazing. But I think the question is this a fundamental shift to a new way of working, or is this more a short-lived reaction to crisis? And at least for the remainder of 2020, 84% of the organizations surveyed said they expect at least half of their workforce to be remote. So something that's not going away anytime soon. Laura, let's go ahead and move ahead here. Let's explore some of the differences between what we call digital leaders and digital laggards. So here on this slide, we're looking at the COVID-19 impact on technology spend for 2020. Now, in the early stages of the pandemic, there was this flurry of activity and focus on deploying remote work capabilities that we just looked at. Companies found themselves heavily focused on business continuity, cost optimization, and really depending on where they are in their recovery, some organizations are still back in that continuity and cost optimization phase. But as the market stabilizes, organizations are pivoting and they're focusing on growth, they're focusing on opportunity, trying to seize market share, and some of them are further along on that journey than others. In the research, 60% of the organizations reported that the pandemic increased the sense of urgency around their digital transformation initiatives. And what was interesting, the digital leaders' response to that was to be aggressive. They're taking bold action. 56% of the digital leaders said that COVID-19 increased their technology spending plans for 2020. And you compare that to the laggards, which said only about 1/3 of them are actually going to increase their spending. So I'll pause there for a moment. In our survey, we define digital leaders as companies with mature digital transformation plans where digital transformation is really ingrained in the DNA of the organization. The digital laggards, on the other hand, they're defined as companies with maybe tentative plans or more limited digital transformation initiatives and investments in place. So with those gaps that you can see on the slide, the spending, we could see really a widening of this divide between the leaders and the laggards. And a lot of that is also going to be heavily dependent on where they are in their recovery phase. Corey, Rick, what are your customers thinking about when it comes to budgets and spending plans for the rest of 2020? How has the pandemic reshaped some of those plans?
Yeah, sure, Jason. IDC does a really good job organizing what our customers are thinking relative to budgets and spending with what they call their 5 stages of recovery. That was put out last month, and essentially they chart the stages between the laggards and the leaders that you describe on a U curve. So, really starting off, this U curve starts off with the initial COVID crisis hitting in March. Kind of goes down into the resulting budget and spending declines in the trough, and then it starts rising again as economic forces and spending improves. So it's really like a U and not a V. Everybody's probably familiar with that whole concept of a V-shaped recovery, but this is like a more realistic U. But briefly, those stages that stratify that curve start with, first off, business continuity, which is just keeping the lights on amidst the immediate shocks in revenue, amidst the virtualization of entire workforces overnight that you talked about, and all the other fun we've been dealing with. Cost optimization is the second stage, and like the name implies, and Corey alluded to it with Best Western, this is really about conserving cash, reducing TCO, but doing it in light of securing as much of your workforce as possible through these tough times. So we move then into business resiliency at the bottom of the curve, and that's really just ensuring that you're built to endure resulting recessionary forces. The fourth stage is targeted investments, where companies intentionally find ways to return to growth as you start kind of going up the other end of the U. And finally, you've got future enterprise, what they call future enterprise, on top of the right-hand side of that U curve, and that's charting the next normal. That term next normal has been coming up a lot. IDC, I think, captures what's going to happen, post-pandemic with that terminology. And that's really just as we try to get back to some semblance of broader stability. But now, across that whole curve, and you talked about, laggards probably over here, leaders over here, companies are in so many different combinations of those 5 stages. But, really, truly, our laggard friends, the digital laggards, are stuck in stages 1 and 2. They're conserving cash and they're hanging on. Whereas the digital leaders, they're already innovating into the next normal. Best Western, Circadence, really good examples. That Global Wealth Manager, good example. And another one that I think is, what that we celebrate here internally, I think also speaks to that, latter digital leader category is Centera Health. They're a company that's pivoting towards that future enterprise, as IDC puts it, because of COVID-19. And to this end, they asked us, just to give some specifics, they asked us to implement Sage, which is our proprietary AI chatbot platform, to automate their level 1 and level 2 functions in order to better contend with crazy call volume during the first month of the stateside outbreak. That's, all the big healthcare organizations were getting slammed with calls about symptoms and where do they go and what do they do and what if I have it. It was pandemonium. But to brag on our team a little bit, we stood Sage up and implemented the platform for them in days versus a lot of off-the-shelf options by the big AI software providers that usually take months to implement. But anyway, the net to all of that is that Sage was able to help drive up vital CX during scary times for thousands of members, thousands of patients. And this, what Centera Health calls innovation at the front lines, this real innovation is now bridging their current state with other AI-oriented and ML-oriented transformation efforts post-pandemic. And Corey, maybe to put this in some measurable scope, what you were closer to the phone, what kind of call volume were we dealing with really to kind of illustrate how big this was for Centera Health?
Yeah, no, like they stood that up in late March, and within 4 weeks, we'd had more than 15,000 unique virtual screenings that were completed across 2 of their websites. It was pretty cool. I mean, yeah, it just redirected it all, and they when you kind of quantify that back to say, okay, well, what type of benefit did that have to our healthcare providers? Just through April, at the time that we quickly measured that, they thought that put back 1,500 hours of nurses and doctors and healthcare providers' time back to what was most important to them, and that's helping their customers and drive high quality care to their patients.
I love that. That's awesome.
Good stuff. Well, let's kind of pivot a little bit and take a look at where some of these investment dollars are going and kind of what organizations are doing. Laura, if you will, let's go ahead and advance the slide for me, please. Now, the pandemic forced companies to reevaluate their technology roadmaps. That's not breaking news by any means. But in the survey and the research, we wanted to look at the challenges with prioritization, delays, and the approaches to those technology projects that Rick and Corey were just talking about. Now, in our survey, we found that only 33% of companies are confident in the IT organization's ability to effectively prioritize those technology projects that are going to help them achieve their strategic goals. And that's a big concern because, as you can see here on this slide here, it's impacting the business's ability to deliver products and services to those customers that are critical. Now, while they're at the top, 42% haven't experienced any project delays. More than half of organizations have delayed up to 25% of their digital transformation projects as a direct result of the pandemic. Go ahead and go to the next slide for me, Laura. But even with those delays, business is still moving forward. Rick and Corey just illustrated that. But in fact, the research from IDC indicates that more than half of organizations are actually adding new projects to their 2020 roadmap. So not just reprioritizing or changing or updating or pivoting, they're actually adding new. And companies in our research we found are taking a myriad of approaches to fine tune their technology plans and adjust. And really, there's no one size fits all. Organizations are in different stages of their rebuild. And there was an interesting quote from one of the survey participants, and they said, I quote, "We've invested heavily over the past year to enable our digital transformation. So we are reaping the benefits now. Current approach has been to stay the course," end quote. And that, I think, is really illustrated in that stat in the middle there. 19% say that the status of technology projects has remained unchanged. Now, the other 80%, they're doing everything from postponing all new projects to maybe more aggressively focusing on projects that are going to enable new business models. Rick, Corey, what should be on this technology roadmap? What does that look like? What are some of the areas maybe organizations should focus on as they prioritize their technology projects?
Sure, Jason. Unless companies have a well-defined transformation vision, unless their related business goals are measurable, like, again, improving CX by a certain percentage or reducing TCO by X or growing revenue by Y, for example. And unless all of that is vigorously impactful to their customers, you can toss any associated roadmaps in the garbage. We'd like to say that you'll have a roadmap or a journey to nowhere, really without those overarching goals, vision, and customer impacts nailed down. So, really the more clarity, Jason, the more precision language and the more precision thinking an organization possesses around its vision, goals, customer, the easier it is then to get into priority and prioritization and kind of stack ranking transformation efforts and the tools and the platforms and the technologies. Unfortunately, some companies have that sequence the wrong way around and they start with technology, but we help fix that sort of stuff with direct line value stream delivery. We might touch on it we might touch on it later based on questions, but this has been a heavy topic, just kind of, getting that purpose down for transformation the right way before you start investing in the tools.
Yeah, I mean, and just to add on to that, Jason, I mean, when you look at the efforts that are taking shape, you have the digital transformation energy that's going out there, but then you also have folks that are talking about their enterprise transformation or their business modernization effort, and then introducing agile transformation as well. So when you kind of put this cloak of organizational change management across all these, change elements, from digital to agile to business to enterprise, and then considering that technical debt, that's pervasive in some of the organizations. It's an area that has to take particular attention to, that I think speaks to what Rick just talked about, and having that vision, concrete and well aligned up and down an organization.
And that's interesting that you bring up the concept of technical debt, Corey, and I think you or Rick brought that up earlier as well. And I want to take a look at some of the insights on that topic from the survey. Laura, if you could move ahead for me, please. So here on this slide, we're looking at respondents who said that accumulating technical debt resulting from pandemic-related project delays are a major concern at my organization. Now, the digital leaders seem like they're much better positioned to deal with the accumulating technical debt, at least compared to the digital laggards. It might still be a heartburn with 27% of them saying it's a concern, but certainly not as big of a challenge as the laggards seem to make of it. Let's kind of pause for a moment here, and Corey, I'll throw this question out to you. For those in the audience who may not be familiar, what exactly is technical debt, and why should companies be concerned with that, or should they be concerned?
Sure. Yeah, and Jason, we kind of look at it in its simplest form, and where, quite frankly, the laggards are dealing with it in a more pervasive way. Technical debt is the overarching components and costs for running suboptimal or legacy systems that end up metastasizing over time and only get worse and more expensive to run and operate over time. But then when you compare that, however, when you look at the digital leaders, and your slide here, kind of speaks to this pretty clearly, that the other aspect of technical debt, and the general consensus, quite frankly, for most agile teams, is that technical debt isn't necessarily bad if understood and intentional in some form or fashion. And in fact, if not all software, most software products have some degree of technical debt. When you consider how much code, teams are shipping every single day, especially in these agile environments that we're talking about, the primary success measure is getting that code out the door. And so it's not necessarily surprising. So, it's important, though, to recognize and take stock and understand where technical debt might be being introduced along that modernization journey, because technical debt can be incurred as a byproduct of compressing the timelines, limiting the budget, not enough resources, or lack of knowledge and expertise across the teams. So missing or abandoning these foundational elements can have just as much, if not more, impact to the true cost than technical debt when you consider it across security and reliability, performance efficiencies, cost optimizations, and then just the general, operational excellence that they're trying to drive through their digital efforts.
Yeah, to the notion, Corey and Jason, that the technical debt really is just, a normal feature to systems and software life cycles. That's why we do things like refactor application. That's why we continuously groom code bases. But, Corey, you're right. If not addressed intentionally, technical debt balloons and really becomes opposed and becomes like pathological to achieving eventual downstream transformation or modernization goals of all those same environments that you're grooming and refactoring and continuously improving.
Yeah, organizations really have to be focused on it. That's a great way you guys frame that up in terms of being intentional about it. I love that. Laura, let's go ahead and move along here to the next slide here. So here on these next few slides, we're going to take a look at digital transformation through the lens of people, process, and technology, and what that means for reimagining the future enterprise. So what is that new normal or next normal? What does that look like as organizations, and what are organizations faced with? Now, in our 2020 State of Digital Transformation report, we explored the people component of successful digital transformation initiatives, and we found the following. Nearly half of digital leaders reported that establishing new ways of working was a critical component for digital transformation success. So those people really underlying the success in their digital transformation initiatives. Now, here on this slide, we're looking at the challenges that are resulting from the pandemic. And all of these are associated with either ways of working or the actual workforce themselves. And I think the pandemic, it simultaneously introduced new workforce challenges, and it made previous workforce challenges maybe that much more difficult to address. Now, these top three challenges that you see there, I think they're really magnified when you start thinking about having large portions of your team working remote, and whether it's a newer employee or even a more tenured employee. How do the leaders kind of manage and lead and train that workforce? And there at the top, you've got training and development, maintaining culture, and then onboarding. And kind of, I think everybody's wrestling with how do we do that in a remote environment? As organizations implement new technologies, they're going to have to really reimagine workforce models, consider how to best engage workers that maybe will be likely working remote for the foreseeable future. Now let's take a look at some of the tools that the workforce is using. Laura, if you move ahead to the next slide for me, please. So again, going back to our 2020 State of Digital Transformation report, we looked at digital leaders and kind of what they identified as critical components to success. And within the tools and processes, there were two critical components that stood out from the others. 61% identified implementing digital tools to make information more accessible across the organization. And 51% identified modifying standard operating procedures to include new digital technologies. So here we're looking at some of the tools that weren't obviously born out of the pandemic, but their adoption is certainly accelerated as a result. And organizations certainly plan to increase the use of digital tools as they transition into the next normal. And what they're going to have to do is really think about how do these tools facilitate agile ways of working, how do they streamline processes versus being maybe a hindrance or a roadblock. You can't let the tools or the processes drive you. You've got to be using them to your benefit and to your advantage. Laura, let's go to the next slide for me, please. So here we have the technologies with the biggest increase in usage as a result of COVID-19. And technology is obviously going to play a critical role for the future enterprise. How are they going to deliver value to their customers? How are they going to design new ways of working? How are they going to automate processes? But that can only be accomplished by establishing a culture that embraces change and agility. It's not just the technology. That's more of the enabler. Let's kind of stop here for a moment. Corey, Rick, as organizations are implementing these technologies that we're looking at here, or they're dealing with the workforce challenges that we looked at on some of those other slides, and dealing with new processes, what should they be thinking about to ensure success? How do they bring that all together?
Yeah, that was a lot of good data on the last three slides here. So maybe if I kind of start here and work backwards in terms of tools and pulling the technologies together for the assurance of success, the way you put it, communication and collaboration is huge. A hallmark of the digital leader profiles that we've been talking about include communication cues and collaboration cues like, heavy whiteboarding sessions, continuous learning, high touch brainstorm sessions, stuff which historically required physical space. But now we know, in-person versions of these rituals are going viral, or I'm sorry, going virtual. Yeah, they're viral too, but they're going virtual. And, companies are thinking about how to replicate all of their collaboration culture and their collaboration goodness in an accountable way, while also, to your point, sustaining what they're all about, sustaining that team culture that's reinforced by all of those rituals historically. So, all of our customers are figuring out, just like we've had to do in increasing capacity, figuring out how to do all of these things across WebEx and Chime and Microsoft Teams and Blackboard, and really institutionalize all of the associated organizational fluency, the desired fluency around those mediums. Probably cool to point out that leaner companies, in our opinion, seem to do all of this better. As an example, we were fortunate to welcome OneStrategy to our team late last year. And for those who don't know OneStrategy, they're a Seattle-based, born in the cloud consulting company and a premier partner exclusively to AWS, to Amazon Web Services. And our OneStrategy brothers and sisters were already built for this virtual world, for this kind of off-prem world, work from home world. That when they want to collaborate, somebody will open up a Slack channel. They will start solving problems in real time. They need to work out architectural reviews with customers. They corral them all into Zoom. They want to hold public workshops. They'll live stream it. And to ensure that this same assimilation for all of us and the broader TEKsystems and TEKsystems Global Services company, to ensure that we're kind of acting the same way and being lean and nimble in the kind of ingestion and the making these tools kind of a normal way of working in that next normal. Our president, J.L. Vather, has pushed the mantra, technology adoption is not an option. We like that. Technology adoption is not an option. But success is happening for us very naturally compared to some of these bigger, bulkier legacy organizations, or even sometimes not bigger organizations, just kind of more legacy, waterfall-y kind of cultured organizations where tool fluency is really scattered. Their business consequently slows down, and their culture consequently and subsequently gets hindered. So, to us, that fluency and that literacy with these tools and making them a normal sort of feature, an enabler, like you said, Jason, I like that enabler to this kind of evolving culture that we're all experiencing. That's kind of the secret sauce as we see it. I think the first part of your question, because again, the last three slides, can you go back maybe 3 slides to when we were talking about, let's see, yes, the ways of working and workforce challenge. Yeah, so this is a big topic. I mean, heck, we could like start extracting all kinds of goodies from each one of these areas. We're swimming in workforce challenges. We could talk to, what do we have here? Innovation oriented stuff. We could talk to you mentioned people before. That's the biggest one. In our opinion, we've got some intense. What else did I see cyber on here? Security. But it's probably woven into a couple of these. We see security as a big thing. Maybe working backwards on some of those, even, just on the cyber and InfoSec topic. That's been hot for years. And, although much of what we're seeing now with the introduction of virtual tools and the, mass migration of people working from home, a lot of this is super obvious, but the pandemic, Jay, is bringing to light that every organization's attack surface just got way bigger with all these employees working from home. At home, the security mindset typically gets a little loose with things like encryption, sharing data, getting phished. Everybody likes to click on stuff and click on files from dubious sources. And it seems that kind of fun activity happens way more often when everybody's comfortable at home, just, kind of working from the couch. I was guilty of that a long time ago, but clicking on stuff I shouldn't, with phishing scams. But we've also got identity and access management becoming a real big deal at the moment. Partners like SailPoint, along with the native IAM, identity access management services inside the big cloud service providers, they're all busy shoring up access controls like we've never seen before. And we got data security, which is always a big deal, but now it is white hot, especially with more people driving online transactions and online activity from home. All of that is turning digital identity fraud into like a hot topic. And we've got partners consequently like CT6, Cyber Team 6 that are helping companies protect their workers and protect their workforce and protect their customers before fraud actually happens, since few companies right now are in a spot to deal with costly remediation, especially the companies that, if you remember back to the U-curve, or in stages 1 and 2, they're trying to conserve cash. They don't need people causing vulnerabilities because of fraud related activity. But Jason, if I haven't put you or our audience to sleep yet, and if I am, just like we can enter some chats here. Maybe somebody raise a hand, like, hey, let Corey talk. But this there's some passion coming here, I think, around the workforce challenges that stratify the people, the culture, the leadership dimension that we've got here and that you allude to. Culture is a big deal for us at TEKsystems, and that's something that is a big deal to these digital leader customers that we're very blessed to work with. And to sustain culture, we can look at especially right now, we can look at flexibility, which employers are offering to their people. We've got the likes of Facebook, Twitter, Google as great public examples here. They've got many populist statements that we all see in social media right now about work from home policies. Jack Dempsey, the Twitter CEO, has made big declarations on this topic, even suggesting that their buildings, the Twitter real estate, could become obsolete if remote work were like an indefinite reality en masse. And that all sounds good on social media, but what about the folks who love being in an office, Jason? What about those who do not have a sustainable home environment to work from indefinitely? Like that's something a lot of us take for granted. Not everybody gets to kind of hang out at home with great Ethernet and Wi-Fi and all. Some people just don't have this, and we've got different dynamics to account for. So these are just some of those workforce challenges affecting culture at the moment. And heck, we could go on the same wavelength. Look at retention. Retention is a big driver of culture. In these times, employers need to be acutely aware of where their people are at with phenomena such as burnout, productivity. To address this, Google Cloud, another really cool partner of ours, is talking about changing their incentives. They're looking to better drive employee engagement and retention, amidst these, volatile circumstances. But look at Google historically. Look at their historic retention levers that they've had on campus oriented features like, free food, really good food, we might add. I've had it before. It's awesome. You've got endless foosball tables. You've got lots of bean bags. You've got kind of like these little nap rooms that are really neat. You've got free transportation. These are really neat features that drive culture, sustain people, keep them around, retain. But with campus life in flux for everybody, companies have to examine alternative incentives. We're seeing stuff like just more flex schedules, way more flex schedules, more creative PTO configurations. To the, let me see on here, the point on training we're providing. Like I see this amongst our digital leader customers, but providing broader virtual upskilling and training to take advantage of the time not spent commuting, not spent trying to get to an office somewhere, taking the bus, or the time not spent living in airports or hotels like Corey and I have been doing for goodness what, Corey, 15 years we've been living that life.
Yeah. Some days, that plane ride sounds nice.
Some days, man. Yeah.
Some days.
But
Yeah,
but I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jason.
yeah, no, I say you just bring up so many great points, and I think what's interesting about this pandemic, it's not that we're all living in this in some way, shape, or form, and if you're not, directly impacted, somebody who's directly impacted, and kind of how we get our work done, how we interact with our colleagues. It's just it's not just an abstract thought on a piece of paper. Like, this is something that everybody's living and breathing every day. Corey, was there anything else that you wanted to add to any of that that Rick was talking about?
Yeah, the only thing too that and working through the content here is and Rick touched on it a second ago, right? Is that the emphasis on empathetic leadership and understanding everybody's situations as different as different as they are, right? It just, when we talk across our own internal organization and we talk with our customers, having that intentional leadership focus and understanding and being real, right, as it relates to what's going on in people's worlds right now. That's beyond maybe the work output that's on that particular sprint case that they're trying to drive out, but there's real things that are going on as we kind of all work through this together and figure out what that new normal is going to look like. So it's, and I know Rick, you touched upon it and even preparing for this talk, and we talk about this all the time. Creating, those safe spaces for people, and really having that empathetic eye to helping people be able to voice whatever concerns that they might have so that we could all better support them, which ultimately is going to have positive outputs from a business perspective, when the people are thriving.
No, that we could take the rest of the day to dig into, and that at least for our culture is both of you gentlemen know is the hallmark to what we focus on here in TEKsystems, because when you talk about empathy, empathy suggests that you're really able to inhabit the perspective of everybody individually, because right now everybody is in very, very different places. Some have it way tougher than others, and just within our lens a little bit here, Jason, to emphasize this, we've had very scary circumstances with team members and families who are like immunocompromised right now. We've got team members trying to support elderly or special needs parents in assisted living arrangements, while also being present at work virtually. We've got team members trying to pacify children that are like really, really not happy to be indoors all day. I'll put it like that. They got like cabin fever, bouncing off walls while like Zoom calls are going on. And I don't say that judgingly at all. Everybody is in different places, and you've got LinkedIn and Twitter influencers out there with like endless platitudes on how to be a great leader during these times, and endless kind of 3-step advice on that offers like the sure thing toward being a great leader for your people, and somebody who can drive culture. But humbly, Corey, you nailed it. We would submit that really, Jason, extreme empathy with every individual you interact. That really feels like the simplest and most genuine answer in this climate. Corey, you said it, man, just knowing where your people are at, being authentic about it, just being human. And, really the leaders right now who don't do those things authentically or cannot learn to do those things naturally, they're standing out like sore thumbs. But yeah, I mean, we could keep talking on this all day long, probably, Jason.
Yeah, but I do have another comment though, Jason, as it relates to how to support those people, right? And it's leaning kind of to shift this back more towards the digital and the technology that's focused on how do we best support our employees and the people that we're embracing to help us through these transformational efforts. because there is a desire for people to get back to work, and the states and the counties and organizations and are clamoring and around, how do we get people back to work safely with the focus of keeping their health and well-being at the center of it all. So you could translate that back to, the customer experience, right, that we talked about at the beginning. This is, core for everybody right now. And I don't care, who you are, this is on your mind. This is within HR's mind. This is within your facilities' minds. And we've had the opportunity to work across a lot of different industries, a lot of different counties and states to build what we call as a Safe at X platform that really is designed to build an omni-channel data ingestion platform that can bring data in that helps people look at, hey, what are the CDC guidelines are within your particular area? If I have a symptoms within my organization, state, county, school, what have you, how do we deal with that? How do we interact as a student or an employee where I might have a concern coming back to school or back to work and saying, well, people aren't wearing masks, or this is real. We're all dealing with this, right? So the use case of what this particular digital platform is enabling by way of driving that health and well-being, driving the confidence, hopefully for the employee or the citizen, to partake and go back to their normal lives in those environments, but then also, their family's confidence is going up as well, that it's safe to send them to that capacity. So, there's that component of it. And then there's the lift that comes off of all the unbelievable manual efforts. And I imagine everybody on this phone call has been reaping in numbers of conversations and efforts to try to, collaborate and bring all that data together. This particular tool is one that's been doing that, and we've in partnership and in architecture with AWS and a great partner with MTX. It's gaining a lot of momentum, and it's just another example of how digital technology can enable and be right focused to help support even through the weirdest times like we're going through.
Yeah, it is certainly fluid. And I think that's, the value in a lot of these technologies. They facilitate and adapt to that need. They help deliver that value in this uncertain time. And really it's, the only certainty out there during all this uncertainty really is change, and you got to be ready. Mm-hmm. I think certainly the digital leaders, they're taking the opportunity to act and really transform. Laura, why don't you go ahead to the next slide here, and we'll kind of pause here. But here we've got some recommendations to help you navigate the digital transformation journey and hopefully shift your focus forward for everyone there in the audience. Laura, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you and see if we have a few minutes to maybe answer some questions for Corey and Rick.
Sure. Let me look here. Okay, one question. You mentioned value streams during the presentation. Can you talk a little bit more about what those are and what drives success?
You want to take that, Corey? You want me to jump in?
Oh, yeah. Take it out, and I'll add some color.
Cool. So value stream delivery, that's another one of these agile inspired concepts, Laura, that's been around for a while, but with this kind of new, very fashionable customer obsession that everybody talks about right now, and maybe we can get back to that a lot of people talk about customer obsession, but some people actually do that. It's really just a method of producing work. Your whole kind of software systems life cycle for a given project and effort and engagement, presumably of a transformation nature. In this regard, like maybe you're just moving workloads to the cloud. Well, it's got to start with a real business purpose, like we alluded to before. There's got to be real business need. There's got to be a very measurable and quantifiable goal that you're aspiring to. Like, the easy one that we talk about all the time is, phone was on. The easy one is like reducing cost by, X, or as we talk about like in the AWS ecosystem, they've got like there's 4 components to their kind of value stream and value framework. And besides cost, there's also achieving business agility, you know, those new products, those new features. There is achieving better operational resilience. You know, that's like moving up uptime, you know, offering better uptime towards systems and better resilience so that, you know, downtime is mitigated and you've got faultless switchover and stuff like that. And there's also things like staff productivity. With, like in this example, a workload move, you presumably don't have to mess around with servers to the degree that you used to anymore. You don't have to manage CPU underutilization on those machines. You don't have to manually provision stuff and attach to data sources and all that. So your staff productivity is going to go up. So being able to monetize those things really starts at the beginning of that stream. And then you kind of just work backwards from there. Like, what now, when we've got real language around that, what now are we doing from kind of a hands-on keyboard and, and a real technical sort of contribution? What are we doing in a good, staggered, agile, usually sprint-based fashion that's going to get us to these goals? What am I missing, Corey?
Yeah, and if you take that kind of the next step is, you know, from that value stream, you know, we all start to look at, well, how do we measure success? And as you said, how do we quantify? How do we monetize? And the inputs that will ultimately, you know, generate, you know, that outcome, or that, you know, mathematical equation essentially comes from the metrics that we start to put in that can measure our success or what and how we're progressing along that value stream, and is it attached to it? And then when you look at those metrics as you design those metrics, it's important to look at and ask the question, so what? Right? Like, so what? You know, what does this metric have to do with driving that particular value stream that ultimately is going to be connected to a positive business outcome, where it's, you know, are we helping make money, save money, optimize, do good in the world? It ultimately is always going to come down to that, which that value stream will be mapped to. But where you come off of that value stream is if we start measuring the inputs that take us away from that value stream.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. What types of metrics or KPIs are most important for digital transformation projects?
Man, we've been alluding to a lot. We might want another question, Laura, because that's we've been talking about TCO, you know, increasing CX, you know, customer experience by moving up maybe an NPS score or something. Or let's go to next one.
Okay. What advice do you have for companies who may receive conflicting advice from different IT services vendors?
Oh, okay, here we go. I'll try to back this into that whole, I like this one because we see this all, man, Corey, we see this all the time. So this, back to that whole, like, yeah, back to that customer obsession thing, you know, really, since Amazon's LPs, or their leadership principles, as they call them, went mainstream a few years ago, you know, everybody says customer obsessed, customer first, customer centered. That's like a super fashionable tagline. But when you've got people with opposing views, you just have to ask them. It's presumably, and we see this where we come into an environment and you know, we can talk about Best Western, we can talk about some of these great companies and customers we get to partner with, and there's, you know, usually like a big box, big iron, big four, big ITO company that's also in there, and it's amazing. It's like 9 out of 10 times whatever we're talking about in terms of, you know, really building these lean value streams to quantified goals, like what Corey just described, they've got an opposing view. And their view usually comes with, well, we've got a massive bench offshore and we can use our bench. And we've got all of these tools and all these licenses that you can take advantage of. And it's like mind numbing, because that has nothing to do with your customer. That has to do with your model. That has to do with and I'm saying you, and I'm looking at Corey and Jason. It's not yours, guys. It's these other big box companies, I promise. But that has to do with their model. That they're not listening to the customer, and they're not trying to very nimbly and in an agile way try to, you know, get them to quantified success, especially and I say like nimble and agile and lean, which usually suggests, compressed pricing that, will kind of move as the project moves and as you get to achieve these value streams. That's not what we see. That conflicting advice is usually happen because there is an utter absence of customer obsession. And there is a big waterfall kind of legacy old guard approach to what the customer needs at that point in time, and like 2 concluding thoughts, and I promise, Corey, you talk and then I'll just shut up. But we just ask our customers when we get into those situations where there's an opposing point of view or there's 2 opposing, whatever it is, it's like, well, how do you breathe life into really understanding your customer goals and being customer first? What supporting standards do you have? What ceremonies do you have? What feedback loops do you drive in line with customer expectations, which are the real requirements, if you will, of any transformation engagement? How do you continuously experiment on behalf and invest on behalf of your customer? And what do they get out of it? Again, in a very quantified way, either they're able to reduce cost by X or, open up, new channels to new markets or whatever. It all has to do with being just vigorously focused and obsessed on how to continually add value, but not with just empty words, how to add value in a quantifiable way every step of the way of that journey, that transformation journey. And I really like, maybe to put a point on that part for me, we really like what IDC talks about in terms of a new species of technology company, and that kind of defines them. Nimble, light, agile, focused on the customer, and they're constantly monetizing their contributions to make their customers' life easier. And in the same way, and we've talked about AWS quite a lot, I think, today, but their CEO, Andy Jassy, at reInvent in December, last December. Remember that, gang? Like back before civilization ended, when we used to attend events and stuff in person. It was fun. But he talked about the new guard of, in the same way that IDC says new species, he talked about the new guard of technology consulting companies and technology integrators and system integrators. And everything we've just discussed really defines that new guard. They're not focused on their own big bulky processes. They're focused on the customer. So that's how we resolve conflicts, sister.
Thank you. Okay, looks like we're about at time. So if we didn't get to your question, we will make sure to email you back. And please don't forget to take that survey at the end. So thank you very much. Thank you, Corey, Rick, Jason. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Cool. Thanks, you guys. Cheers.